How women start regretting the man they took for granted. I'll tell you something that's going to mess with your head a little. If a woman took you for granted, know that she usually doesn't regret it when the relationship ends. She regrets it later. And if you're doing what most men do after a breakup, you're accidentally making sure that regret never shows up at all. If you've ever wondered, did I actually matter to her? Stay with me, because this is going to answer that question in a way that you've never heard before. Jessica O.S. here. Welcome to the channel. So, in the video today, I'm going to break down a couple of things. What it really means when a woman takes a man for granted, why women don't regret it right away, even if you're a good man, the exact conditions that cause regret to form, and the biggest mistakes men make that kill regret before it ever has a chance to show up. By the end, you'll stop guessing and start seeing the situation as clear as day. Let's jump right in. What taken for granted really looks like means being taken for granted is not about being treated badly in obvious ways. It's the quiet shift that happens when your presence stops having impact. At the beginning of your relationship, your attention matters because it's not assumed. When you pull back, it's noticed. When you lean in, it changes how things feel between you. When you're upset, it creates a reaction. Presence affects her behavior. Period. Over time, however, when a man is taken for granted, that effect will slowly begin to disappear. Your presence will become expected instead of meaningful. She'll no longer feel like she has to show up in a certain way to keep you engaged. You're just there. This happens because your availability becomes predictable. When something feels predictable, the brain stops paying close attention to it. Hear me. Being taken for granted doesn't mean she thinks that you're not valuable. In actual fact, it means that she thinks that you're not at risk of leaving. Once your presence feels guaranteed, her attention towards it will fade without her even realizing it. And from a man's point of view, this might feel unfair. I mean, you're being reliable, you're being emotionally open, you're doing what you believe a good partner should do. When her energy drops, it feels confusing because basically you don't do anything wrong, right? And in many cases, you actually try harder. But when consistency is not matched with clear standards, what happens is the brain learns that access to you doesn't require effort. Your presence becomes something she expects and not something that she actively values. The signs of being taken for granted are usually small. Trust me, she'll respond slower to your messages. She'll check in less. She'll assume that you'll adjust. She doesn't feel the urgency to fix problems. She stops trying as hard to keep the connection strong. And this is because your presence no longer feels like something that actually could be lost. When your attention is always available, no matter how she shows up for you, it starts to blend into the background. And you can understand that, right? I mean, it's not rocket science. You're still there, but you no longer stand out emotionally for her. But this also explains why regret doesn't show up right away. I mean, as long as you're still accessible to her, there's nothing she's going to miss. And I tell guys this all the time. The brain cannot regret losing something it still believes it can have. Regret will only happen when there's real distance and contrast. Being taken for granted removes both. Why she doesn't regret it, she may not regret right after the breakup. Here's why after a breakup. When the breakup first happens, many men expect regret to show up immediately. They assume that if the relationship mattered, she should feel that loss right away, right? When she feels calm, distant, or even relieved, you tend to get shocked. And it can make you question your value in the entire relationship. But the absence of regret in that moment doesn't mean the relationship meant nothing to her. For most women, the emotional work, hear me, the emotional work of leaving happened before the breakup and not after it. By the time she ends things, she's already spent weeks or months thinking through the decision. She's replayed the arguments. She's noticed the pattern. She's slowly detached emotionally. The breakup is not the start of the loss of her. It's the conclusion of the process she's already been living through internally. During the relationship, especially in the latter stages, she often experiences disappointment quietly. She may feel unheard, disconnected, or uncertain about the future. And instead of expressing this clearly or leaving right away, she'll process it internally for weeks and sometimes even months. Each moment of unmet expectation or emotional distance will help her to prepare for separation. And by the time she finally walks away, she's already grieved much of what she's losing. This is why the immediate aftermath can look so confusing to men. She may seem lighter, more confident, or emotionally steady, and it's not because she's happy about the breakup. It's usually that she feels relief from no longer carrying that internal conflict. The tension that existed while she was deciding whether to stay or leave has been released. You see, another important factor in this whole conversation is access. Right after the breakup, she often feels a sense of emotional availability. Even if contact stops, her brain doesn't register permanent loss right away. There's still a feeling of some control. She believes she could reach out to you whenever she wants, and that sense of optional access will prevent regret from forming. You see, regret requires distance and contrast. Immediately after the breakup, neither will exist because she's not yet experienced life without you in a meaningful way anyway, right? She's not yet compared what she thought would happen to what actually happens. And without that comparison, there's nothing to regret. For men, this timing feels unfair because, well, their regret hits immediately. Once access is gone, you begin replaying moments and imagining different outcomes, but women often do this way earlier while they're still in the relationship. That difference in timing will create the emotional imbalance that men feel after a breakup. This also explains why chasing her right after the breakup almost always backfires. When a man tries to reconnect immediately, he confirms her belief that access is still available. You see, regret, if it comes at all, will come later. And only after access is removed, time has passed, and reality begins to differ from expectation. Until then, what it looks like is indifference. Why male regret hits faster, and female regret is delayed. So male regret tends to hit fast because men process loss after it happens and not before. When a relationship ends, access, of course, is suddenly removed and the routine is broken. The emotional connection is no longer available. That sudden loss will create some shock. The brain immediately begins searching for, reasons, missed opportunities, you name it. Regret rushes in because the mind is trying to make sense of what just disappeared. For many men, the breakup is the moment they finally slow down and reflect. While the relationship was still active, they were focused on maintaining stability, avoiding conflict, or assuming things would work themselves out. Once the relationship ends, all of those moments that you postponed thinking about will come flooding back, and then you replay the conversations, the choices, the times you could have acted differently. I can go on, but that's why male regret feels intense, feels immediate. Men tend to regret an action more than wrong action. They think more about what they didn't say, what they didn't set boundaries around, or when they failed to lead. When the relationship ends, those missed moments feel final. There's no longer a chance to correct them. So the regret will hit hard and fast. In simple terms, male regret is fast because it follows loss. Female regret is delayed because it follows evaluation. What more can I say? If you want more content that actually explains what's happening instead of feeding you false hope, please subscribe to the channel. This channel is for men who want clarity and not comfort. Why some women regret and why she still won't come back, still don't come back. So regret doesn't automatically lead to action. This is one of the hardest truths for men to accept because it breaks the idea that realizing a mistake should always result in correcting it, when in reality, regret and return are two separate processes, right? A woman can regret misjudging a man and still decide not to re-enter the relationship. One reason for this is identity protection. Coming back requires admitting, not just privately, but outwardly, that the decision to leave may have been a wrong one. For many women, that admission feels threatening to their self-image. It forces them to confront the idea that they perhaps may have misread their own judgment, intuition, or emotional intelligence. So protecting that identity can feel more important than reopening a connection. Another reason is pride and social accountability. Returning to a relationship often feels like moving backwards instead of forward, right? And especially if friends, family, or peers supported the relationship. Even if regret is present, the pressure to appear consistent and decisive can outweigh the desire to repair what's lost. The cost of reversing can feel higher than the cost of living with regret. There's also a fear of being wrong twice. What if she returns and the relationship fails again? The emotional and psychological cost just feels so heavy. See, even when regret exists, the risk of repeating the same pain can stop her from acting on it. In this case, regret becomes a lesson rather than a motivator. You see, there are other women who regret that decision in a very specific way. They don't regret the relationship ending. They regret the way it ended or how the man was evaluated. So this kind of regret will acknowledge misjudgment without creating any kind of desire to reconnect. It becomes a quiet realization rather than a call to action, so to speak. I can keep going. Another reason could be timing. Regret will often show up after emotional momentum has moved on. And by that time she reaches clarity, she may already have adopted to this other life without the relationship. And even if she sees the loss more clearly, she may no longer feel emotionally equipped to re-engage. You see, regret can coexist without acceptance. A woman can recognize that she let something valuable go and still believe that returning is not the right choice. And in that case, regret doesn't lead to pursuit. It becomes a private acknowledgement that influences future decisions rather than changing the past. So sometimes the most accurate outcome of regret is not reconciliation, but growth. Not just for the man, but for the woman as well. A woman may carry the lesson forward without reopening the door. And a man's task is not to wait for regret to turn into return, but to move forward thinking and knowing that regret alone does not define his value or his future. How men should move after being taken for granted. So after being taken for granted, the most dangerous move a man can make is to react emotionally instead of recalibrating internally. See, many men respond by either chasing harder, completely shutting down, or something like that. But both responses come from the same place. They're attempts to restore loss, value through reaction. And neither of these will work. The first shift a man must make is understanding that being taken for granted is proof of a misaligned dynamic. That doesn't mean you should become cold or distant. It means he should stop offering access that is not met with equal investment. Moving correctly starts with restraint, not silence as punishment, but silence as space. Space allows emotional systems to reset. It removes the assumption of guaranteed access. It gives his presence room to be felt rather than expected. This restraint is about refusing to keep reinforcing a pattern that no longer serves him. Right. The second shift is reclaiming standards quietly. Men often announce boundaries after being taken for granted, and that usually backfires. Standards are not speeches, they're filters. Moving forward will mean letting behavior determine access. If effort drops on her part, availability adjusts. If respect fades, engagement decreases. This happens without argument or explanation. Calm consistency is far powerful than emotional correction. The third shift I want you to realize is redirecting focus from outcome to identity. After being taken for granted, many men fixate on whether she will regret it, come back, or reach out. That keeps a sense of worth tied to her reaction. Moving correctly will mean anchoring value internally. The question becomes not, will she see my value, but am I showing up in a way that reflects my value? This often requires a period of self-honesty. Look at where you have extended, where you avoided discomfort, where you stayed quiet instead of leading. Growth comes from understanding what you train the relationship to expect. Finally, a man moves forward by refusing to wait. Waiting for regret, closure, or validation will keep you stuck in the same dynamic that took you for granted in the first place. Forward motion means continuing life with intention. It means investing energy into purpose, discipline, relationships that respond to effort, right? It doesn't require hostility or bitterness. It requires direction. The strongest position a man can take after being taken for granted, hear me guys, is calm self-respect. Jessica Oz here. Thanks for watching and listening. I'll catch you in the next